So I have already discussed the straw man fallacy in another video. So if you'll go back to my critical thinking series, I can't remember what number it is, but I talk about informal fallacies. And then I describe 3 different ones. I'm going to describe those over again a little bit differently here. But in order to familiarize yourself with the basics of what an informal fallacy is, I would suggest you go watch that video from the critical thinking series. So let's talk about the straw man argument. Have you ever seen, or maybe you do this, someone shadow boxing? When you're shadow boxing, you're practicing boxing, but you're throwing punches that don't actually hit anyone. Not to downplay the idea or the value of shadow boxing, I'm just pointing out that that's not a real fight. It's a practice fight, but you're not actually hitting anybody. You're just punching into the air. If you can think of a straw man argument kind of like that, where the person you're arguing with is not actually dealing with any of your real facts. They're not actually dealing with any of the evidence that you actually stated. They're diverting the issue in some kind of way. They're swinging at a pretend version of somebody else's point. And there are 3 different ways straw man arguments show up. Now, F. Scott Aikin and John Casey define a straw man argument like this. The straw man fallacy consists in inappropriately constructing or selecting weak or comparatively weaker versions of the opposition's arguments, right? Inappropriately constructing or selecting weak versions of the opposition's argument. So the straw man in particular, that's what I'm referring to this as the straw man, but there are different versions of it. The basic straw man is simply when you twist what your opponent actually said. Now remember, when thinking about informal fallacies, remember that these are things that you have done to others. So a straw man fallacy on your part is when you twist what your opponent actually said, or vice versa, when they do it to you, when they twist what you said and they don't respond to you and your claims, they respond to something else. So the basic straw man is simply when they twist something you say. The weak man is when you cherry pick their worst arguments or their worst evidence, the weakest claims that they make, and then you act like that's their whole argument. Right, so they might come to you with an argument and list several different points, and you just attack the weakest one, the worst one, the easiest one to attack, and then you pretend like that is representative of their whole argument. Or in the worst case, what they often call the hollow man is when you completely invent an argument that nobody actually made up, and then you proceed to stomp it. You proceed to clown it as if you've done something, right? So straw man is simply twisting what your opponent said. The weak man is when you zero in on the weakest aspect of the argument and then pretend like that represents the whole argument. And the hollow man is when you completely invent something, you make a claim, draw on a piece of evidence that nobody actually said, and then you attack that and think that you've won the argument. Now, why do we do this? Well, winning feels good, right? In all of the informal fallacies, remember, it's not that people are necessarily doing this consciously. Sometimes people are, sometimes people aren't. It's all just like a default sort of pattern that we have. But winning feels good. And if you're, especially in the prison environment, maintaining a reputation of always being right or being able to argue well or understanding the truth, that still holds a certain level of currency. Now, most of the time in prison, the currency that it really means something or has value is whether or not you're willing to fight or be violent or you're a badass. But there is still the value in a person who knows what they're talking about, is usually right, has a good reputation for understanding the world and common events, especially when people are attacking something you are personally attached to, some cherished idea you have. Like if you're a Christian and someone's attacking your faith, or Muslim and someone's attacking your faith, or politics, or whatever, right? So this is why we often do this. But it kills any honest dialogue because you are not actually responding to what the other person said. Right? Vice versa. They are not actually responding to what you said. Who knows what their motivations are? Maybe they're uninterested in arguing in the first place. Maybe they're not good at it. Maybe they don't really understand what to say to you. Who knows what the motivations are? But what is not happening is honest dialogue. You're not getting anywhere in the conversation. So here's one example of a straw man argument. Let's say you ask you ask the officers if y'all can stay at the library a little longer than expected, or you ask them to keep the doors unlocked for a little longer than expected. You make some sort of small ask like this, and they blow up and say, "Oh, so now the whole prison is supposed to run on your schedule." Right? Oh, now the whole prison is supposed to do whatever you want to do and follow your personal directives. That's not what you said. That's not what you said, and that's a far exaggeration of what you actually said, right? They just took this small request and blew it up into something that it wasn't really, right? So that's obvious. That's an easy one. You recognize these things, they happen all the time. Let's say there's a weak man argument. Let's say you propose something to the unit that you want larger food portions in the chow hall, right? And you make this argument about why you all should have larger portions of food in the chow hall. You talk about nutrition guidelines. And this is the important part that the prison always wants to hear. You talk about the fact that the prison actually has a budget. There was a budget increase and you can actually afford larger portions of food in the chow hall. And then you also mention the fact that it will actually make the inmates happier, right? So you're making an argument that you should have larger portions in the chow hall because it's more nutritious. The prison actually has an increased budget that can afford it, and it will also make everybody much happier. And so then the administration responds not by focusing on the nutrition guidelines, not by focusing on the fact that they have an increased budget, but by focusing on the fact that making inmates happier is not their job, right? They say something like that. They take the weakest point that you made, or the weakest or easiest point you made that they can attack, and then they make it out like that was the whole argument, right? So, what you're saying is we should increase the portion of food in the chow hall because it's going to make everybody happy. Well, when they put it like that, it sounds kind of foolish, but that was just one piece of the evidence that you brought. So that's a weak man. They're not focusing on the stronger points. They're only focusing on the weaker points. For a hollow man argument, let's say that there was a new class offered in the prison. Maybe it was a new therapeutic class being offered in the prison. And a bunch of people signed up for the class and were really doing well. They felt like it was personally beneficial to them in some way. But then the skeptic is the guy who complains and says, all you guys are doing this because, you want to get a trophy or you want to get a certificate for parole. Right. So why should I go take this class just because it's going to, get me another meaningless certificate that I can show parole? Well, maybe there weren't any certificates. Nobody ever mentioned anything about a certificate. The benefit of going to the class had to do with psychological value, not parole. Right. So in this case, the skeptic is just fabricating something. He's just making something up. To poke fun at the therapeutic classes. So that would be a hollow man when somebody just makes something up out of thin air, or their interpretation of your claims or evidence is so wildly incorrect that it seems made up. That would be a hollow man argument. So when you're in an argument and you're trying to think through these things, you want to ask yourself, okay, did the other person restate my claim accurately? This is why communication is important in argumentation. It's also important why clarifying your terms, restating information is important. It's not because you're trying to get people off track. It's because you're actually trying to be clear. So did they restate your claim accurately? Can they restate it accurately? Right? Did they skip your stronger points? Did they skip some of the evidence that you laid out to make your claim? Did they completely invent something new that you never actually said, right? Any of these things, if the other person has done them, then that is evidence of them using a straw man argument against you. Ways that you can try to remedy this is simply by voluntarily restating what you said, elaborating what you said to make sure that it's clearer, and enumerating the points that you made and asking them to deal with the points, right? Stick with the facts. Focus on what I actually said. That's what you need to do. And a person who is unwilling to do that is probably not somebody that you should be in a discussion or debate with in the first place. So with the straw man arguments, we want to make sure that we're fighting the real fight, right? That we're engaged in the real argument. We're dealing with the actual facts and evidence, not a bunch of made up stuff, not made up ideas or idols or anything like that. We're focused on the actual arguments in hand, because that is the only way progress will be made in the discovery of truth.
Diamonds.